When I drove up to my 200-acre family estate, expecting open fields and memories of my grandfather, I found a sprawling neighborhood of 98 houses instead, built by a smug HOA president named Karen who thought she could steal my land. Too bad for her, I own every inch, and I'm not letting go without a fight. The winding road to my 200-acre estate in Willow Creek was supposed to lead to solitude, a haven inherited from my grandfather. I hadn't visited in years, content to let the land sit untouched while I poured my energy into my tech startup in the city. The rolling hills, thickets of pine, and the quiet trickle of the creek were distant memories, preserved in childhood summer spent exploring the wild expanse. I'd always planned to return one day, to build a quiet life here when the chaos of Silicon Valley grew too heavy. But that crisp April evening, as my truck crested the hill, the sight before me ripped those plans to shreds. Where open fields once stretched, kissed by golden sunlight and swaying with wildflowers, a sprawling neighborhood of identical beige houses stood like an invasion. Rows of cookie-cutter homes, their vinyl siding gleaming unnaturally, were punctuated by manicured lawns and driveways lined with SUVs. A gaudy sign loomed at the entrance, its bold letters mocking me, Willow Grove Estates, a premier HOA community. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening. This was my land, every inch of it. My grandfather's legacy, now buried under asphalt and conformity. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This couldn't be real. I fumbled for my phone, scrolling through my email until I found the property deed, sent by my lawyer after my grandfather's passing 3 years ago. The document loaded, clear as day, Ethan Caldwell, sole owner of 200 acres, parcel ID 47-392-18, Willow Creek, County of Marinette. No liens, no disputes, no transfers. So how the hell were 98 houses, complete with mailboxes and swing sets, standing on my property? The air was cool, tinged with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming lilacs, but it did nothing to calm the heat rising in my chest. I stepped out of my truck, boots crunching against the gravel, and scanned the scene. A few residents glanced my way, a man watering his lawn, a jogger with earbuds, but their attention slid off me, as if I were the intruder. My eyes caught on a woman striding toward me from the direction of the sign. She wore a navy blazer over a pristine white blouse, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, and her smile was as sharp as a blade. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone laced with condescension, like I was a lost delivery driver. I squared my shoulders, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. I own this land. Care to explain what's going on?" Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly, sizing me up. "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Willow Grove HOA. This development is fully approved." "You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" The word came out sharper than I intended. I held up my phone, the deed glowing on the screen. "This says I own 200 acres, including every inch you're standing on. I didn't approve any development, and I sure as hell didn't sell." Karen's eyes flickered to the screen, but she didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, her manicured nails tapping against her sleeve. "Take it up with the county. We've been here for 2 years, and everything's in order. Permits, titles, inspections, all of it." I clenched my jaw, the muscles twitching. "Permits? On my land? Lady, I don't know who you think you're dealing with, but I'm not some tourist. This is my property, and I want answers. Now." Her smile tightened, a crack in her polished facade. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand you're upset, but I suggest you contact the county clerk's office. They'll confirm everything. Willow Grove is a thriving community, and we're not going anywhere." I took a step closer, my voice low. "We'll see about that." Karen didn't budge, her gaze locked on mine like a predator sizing up prey. Behind her, a few residents had stopped to watch. Their curiosity piqued. A man in a polo shirt paused his lawnmower, wiping sweat from his brow, while a woman with a stroller lingered near a mailbox, pretending to check her phone. The weight of their stares pressed against me, but I held my ground. "Fine," I said, breaking the silence. "I'll go to the county. But if there's even a hint of fraud here, I'll have every one of these houses torn down. You can count on that." Karen's lips twitched, but she said nothing, just gave a curt nod before turning on her heel and striding back toward the neighborhood. I watched her go, her heels clicking against the pavement, until she disappeared behind a row of houses. The air felt heavier now, thick with questions I couldn't answer. How had this happened? Who had authorized it? And why hadn't anyone contacted me? I climbed back into my truck, slamming the door harder than necessary. The deed was still open on my phone, and I stared at it, willing it to reveal some clue, some mistake. But it was ironclad. My grandfather had been meticulous, a man who trusted lawyers and paper trails over handshakes. There was no way he'd have let this land slip through his fingers, and I hadn't either. As I started the engine, my eyes drifted to the horizon, where the last of my untouched land vanished into the encroaching sprawl. A memory flashed, my grandfather teaching me to fish in the creek, his calloused hands steadying the rod, his voice gruff but warm. "This land's yours, Ethan. It's freedom. Don't let anyone take that from you." I shifted into gear, my resolve hardening. Whoever was behind this, Karen, the county, or some faceless developer, was about to learn just how far I'd go to take back what was mine. Back at a motel in town, I called my lawyer, Sarah Nguyen, who'd handled my grandfather's estate. "Ethan, this is serious," she said after I explained. "Send me the deed and any records you have. I'll check the county filings." While Sarah dug into the paperwork, I drove back to the estate, watching families unpack moving vans, oblivious to the fact they were on stolen land. Anger mixed with unease. How had this happened under my nose? Sarah called 2 days later. "It's a mess, Ethan. Someone filed a sale agreement with the county, claiming you sold the land to Pinnacle Homes, a development company. The signatures forged, sloppy work, too." "Forged?" I gripped the phone. "Who's behind this?" "Karen Whitmore's name is on the HOA documents, but Pinnacle Homes is a shell company. I'm still tracing the owners. I've set up a meeting with the county clerk tomorrow." I spent the night poring over old emails and maps, my grandfather's words echoing, "Land is power, Ethan. Never let it go." I wasn't about to. The county office was a cramped room on the second floor of a tired brick building, the kind where the air smelled of burnt coffee, old paper, and bureaucracy that hadn't changed since the 80s. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor over the scuffed linoleum floor. I sat at a folding table, my lawyer Sarah beside me, her sharp eyes scanning a stack of documents she'd brought to bury whoever thought they could steal my land. Across from us, Karen Whitmore sat ramrod straight, her navy blazer as crisp as her attitude. Beside her was her lawyer, a wiry man named Greg who kept adjusting his glasses, his fingers twitching like he was already regretting taking this case. Linda, the county clerk, stood at the head of the table, her gray hair pulled into a loose bun. She was a no-nonsense woman, the kind who'd seen every small-town dispute from fence-line feuds to tax dodgers. She laid out 2 sets of documents with the precision of a surgeon, my original deed, its edges worn but its words unequivocal, and a second packet, a sale agreement to Pinnacle Homes, dated 2 years ago, with a signature that sure as hell wasn't mine. "Mr. Caldwell's title is undisputed," Linda said, her voice flat but firm, like she was reading a verdict. "The deed filed with the county shows Ethan Caldwell as the sole owner of the 200-acre parcel in Willow Creek. This sale agreement to Pinnacle Homes is invalid. The signature doesn't match any of Mr. Caldwell's records, and there's no evidence he was ever notified of a transfer." Greg cleared his throat, his glasses slipping down his nose again. "This is absurd," he sputtered, flipping through his own folder as if he'd find a miracle buried in the fine print. "Pinnacle Homes invested millions in good faith. The permits were approved, the development built, the home's occupied. You can't just undo it. Sarah leaned forward, her voice cool as steel. Then your clients were duped, Greg. The land belongs to Ethan. Always has. If Pinnacle Homes didn't verify the title before building, that's their failure, not my clients. Karen's face turned crimson, her lips pressed into a thin line. You can't just tear down 98 homes, she snapped, her composure cracking like thin ice. These are families, real people with lives, jobs, children. They have rights. I felt the heat rise in my chest, my hands curling into fists under the table. You built on stolen property, I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut through the room. You don't get to lecture me about rights, Karen. Not when your premier community is squatting on my grandfather's land. The room went quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the lights and Greg's nervous pen tapping. Linda adjusted her glasses, peering at the forged agreement. The county's records show this sale was filed by a third party, a real estate firm called Crestview Partners. They provided the documentation, and it was processed without challenge. But given the evidence, it's clear this was fraudulent. Mr. Caldwell, the county recognizes your ownership. Pinnacle Homes and the Willow Grove HOA will be ordered to vacate. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah cut him off. If Pinnacle wants to sue Crestview for misrepresentation, that's their prerogative. But Ethan's deed takes precedence. The law's clear. Karen shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. This is outrageous. You're destroying a community over a technicality. Do you have any idea what this will do to the residents? It's not a technicality, I said, standing to meet her gaze. It's my land. You didn't bother checking who owned it before you started building. That's on you. Her eyes blazed, but she didn't have a comeback. Instead, she turned to Greg, her voice a harsh whisper. Do something. Greg adjusted his glasses again, sweat beading on his forehead. We'll appeal. We'll take this to court if we have to. Sarah smirked, gathering her papers. Good luck with that. The county's ruling is airtight, and we've got a forensic document analyst ready to testify that the signature's a forgery. You're welcome to try. Linda cleared her throat, signaling the meeting was over. The order to vacate will be issued by end of day. Mr. Caldwell, you'll receive a copy. Pinnacle Homes and the HOA have 30 days to comply. I nodded, my jaw still tight. It should have felt like a victory, but the weight of what came next was already settling in. Karen stormed out, Greg scrambling to keep up, muttering about motions and injunctions. Sarah clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Ethan. This is your land, and no one's taking it from you. But as we left the county office, the late afternoon sun dipping low, I knew this wasn't over. By evening, Karen had rallied the homeowners like a general marshalling troops. I drove back to Willow Creek to check on the property, and there they were, dozens of residents gathered at the entrance to Willow Grove Estates, their faces a mix of anger and fear. Homemade signs lined the road, "Save our homes." "Stop the greedy land grab." "Families over profit." A few kids clutched balloons, their parents shouting over each other, their voices carrying on the cool evening breeze. Karen stood at the center, megaphone in hand, her voice cutting through the crowd. This man wants to tear down your homes. Your children's schools, your neighbors, your lives, all for his own gain. We won't let him win. The crowd cheered, their eyes turning to me as I stepped out of my truck. A man in a flannel shirt pointed, his face twisted with rage. You're gonna kick us out? Where are we supposed to go? I opened my mouth to respond, to explain that I wasn't the villain here, that I was just taking back what was stolen, but the words caught in my throat. These people weren't the ones who'd forged the deed or approved the permits. They'd bought their homes, moved their families, built their lives, all thinking everything was above board. And now, because of someone else's greed, they were caught in the crossfire. Karen lowered the megaphone, her eyes locking onto mine. "You're not welcome here, Ethan Caldwell," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And we're not going anywhere." The crowd roared again, their signs bobbing like battle flags. I stood there, alone against the tide, my grandfather's words echoing in my mind, "This land's yours, Ethan. It's freedom. Don't let anyone take that from you." But as I looked at the faces glaring back at me, mothers, fathers, kids clutching their parents' hands, I wondered what kind of freedom was worth this fight. Karen Whitmore's campaign hit like a wildfire, spreading resentment through Willow Grove estates faster than I could have imagined. By the end of the week, the neighborhood had become a fortress of hostility. Homeowners glared as I drove past, their eyes boring into me like I was some corporate raider come to bulldoze their dreams. Local news outlets didn't help, running sensational stories about the heartless landowner, threatening to displace dozens of families. Channel SX's headline was particularly brutal: "Tech millionaire versus middle-class families, the battle for Willow Creek." They'd dug up a photo of me from a startup conference, looking smug in a tailored suit, and plastered it next to tearful interviews with residents clutching their kids. I felt a pang of guilt twist in my gut. These people had been misled, lied to by someone they trusted, but my grandfather's land wasn't theirs to claim, no matter how many picket signs they waved. I holed up in a motel on the edge of town, the only place I could find that didn't feel like enemy territory. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, angry emails from homeowners, voicemails from reporters, even a few veiled threats from anonymous numbers. Sarah, my lawyer, sat across from me at the motel's wobbly table, her laptop open and a cup of gas station coffee in her hand. She was unfazed, her calm demeanor a lifeline in the chaos. "We need to shift the narrative," she said, her fingers tapping the keyboard. "You're not the bad guy here, Ethan. These people were conned, just like you. We need to give them a way out that doesn't feel like a defeat. What do you suggest?" I asked, rubbing my temples. The weight of the past week, Karen's rally, the county ruling, the growing mob outside my land, felt like a noose tightening. "Offer to sell the land to the homeowners at market value," Sarah said. "It's fair, it keeps you in control, and it shows you're not out to ruin their lives. Most of them just want stability. Give them a chance to own their homes legally, and you'll peel away Karen's support." I nodded, but my jaw tightened at the thought of Karen and Pinnacle Homes, the developer behind this mess. "I'm fine with the homeowners, but Pinnacle and Karen get nothing. They don't profit off this scam." Sarah's lips curled into a rare smile. "Agreed. We'll make that crystal clear." We drafted letters to every homeowner in Willow Grove, laying out the facts, the forged deed, the county's ruling, and my offer to negotiate fair sales for their lots. I wasn't heartless, I didn't want families uprooted, but I wasn't about to let my grandfather's legacy be stolen. Sarah sent the letters through certified mail, ensuring every resident got one. Within days, a few homeowners reached out, their tones apologetic, even desperate. A single mom named Maria called, her voice trembling as she explained how she'd saved for years to buy her house, unaware of the fraud. Another, an older couple named the Hendersons, invited me to their home to discuss terms, offering coffee and an earnest plea to keep their retirement dream intact. I felt for them, and we started working out deals. But not everyone was so reasonable. Karen, predictably, doubled down. She twisted my offer into a new weapon, claiming I was extorting the community with outrageous prices to line my pockets. Her HOA meetings became war councils, with flyers circulating that called me a greedy tyrant and urged residents to fight. By the end of the week, a dozen homeowners, egged on by Karen, had filed lawsuits against me, claiming I was illegally evicting them and demanding compensation for their losses. The claims were baseless. Sarah assured me they'd be thrown out, but they tied up my time and resources, just as Karen intended. I was starting to feel like I was fighting a hydra, cut off one head, and two more appeared. Then Sarah dropped a bombshell that changed everything. We were in her office, a small space above a bakery that smelled faintly of cinnamon, when she slid a stack of printed emails across the desk. Her eyes gleamed with the kind of intensity you only see when someone knows they've struck gold. "Read these," she said. I had a contact in the county IT department pull some records. "These are emails between Karen Whitmore and Victor Lang, Pinnacle Homes CEO." I scanned the first page, my pulse quickening. The emails, dated 3 years back, laid out a scheme so brazen it made my blood boil. Karen and Victor had orchestrated the forgery of the sale agreement, using a shell company called Crestview Partners to file the paperwork. They'd faked my signature, pushed the permits through a bribed county official, and pocketed millions from the home sales. The HOA, which Karen ran with an iron grip, was their shield, a way to control the narrative and keep the residents in line. One email from Karen to Victor was particularly damning: "The old man's dead, and the grandson's too busy playing tech mogul to notice. By the time anyone checks, we'll be untouchable." I looked up at Sarah, my hands shaking with rage. They knew. They knew it was my land, and they stole it anyway. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "This is fraud, Ethan. Criminal fraud. We've got enough here to not only shut down Pinnacle but to send Karen and Victor to jail. I'm talking felonies, forgery, conspiracy, maybe even racketeering if we dig deeper. What's the next step?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "We take this to the district attorney," Sarah said. "And we go public. The homeowners need to know who the real villains are. Once they see these emails, Karen's little crusade falls apart." I leaned back in the chair, staring at the emails. Part of me wanted to storm into the next HOA meeting and shove the evidence in Karen's face, watch her squirm as her lies unraveled. But I knew Sarah was right, going public strategically would hit harder. Still, the thought of Karen rallying her mob while my grandfather's land sat under her control gnawed at me. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about justice. As I drove back to the motel that night, the neon glow of the sign casting shadows across my dashboard, I passed the entrance to Willow Grove. The Save Our Homes signs had multiplied, some now adorned with crude drawings of me as a cartoonish villain, complete with a $sign cape. Karen's war wasn't slowing down. But now I had a weapon of my own, and I was ready to fight fire with fire. The Marinette County Courthouse was a squat, limestone building that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the Reagan administration. Its wood-paneled courtroom smelled of polished oak and stale tension, the kind that lingers from years of small-town dramas and petty disputes. But today, the stakes were higher. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped tightly to keep them from shaking, as Sarah stood at the plaintiff's table, a stack of evidence in front of her. The emails between Karen Whitmore and Victor Lang, Pinnacle Homes CEO, were our silver bullet, and Sarah was ready to fire. The gallery was packed, homeowners from Willow Grove Estates filled the benches, their faces a mix of confusion, anger, and dread. Some clutched crumpled Save Our Homes flyers, remnants of Karen's propaganda campaign. Reporters from local news stations lined the back, their cameras trained on the judge's bench. Karen sat at the defense table, her navy blazer replaced by a gray pantsuit, her usual icy confidence fraying at the edges. Beside her, Victor Lang looked like a man who'd already lost, his tie loosened and his eyes darting nervously. Their lawyer, Greg, was conspicuously absent, replaced by a slick attorney from a Milwaukee firm who oozed overconfidence. Sarah began, her voice steady and commanding. "Your Honor, the evidence before you is irrefutable. Karen Whitmore and Victor Lang conspired to forge a sale agreement for Ethan Caldwell's 200-acre estate in Willow Creek. They targeted this land knowing Mr. Caldwell had been absent, assuming he'd never notice. They bribed a county official, Dennis Hargrove, to fast-track permits and push through a fraudulent transfer. These emails," she held up the printed stack, "detail their scheme, step by step, including their plan to pocket millions from home sales while paying a sham $50,000 for land worth far more." The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned forward, her glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the documents. Sarah projected one of the emails onto a screen for the courtroom to see. Dated 3 years ago, it was from Karen to Victor. Caldwell's too busy playing tech guru in California. The old man's gone, and no one's watching the land. Crestview Partners will file the sale, and Hargrove's on board for $20,000. By the time anyone notices, we'll have the deeds and the profits. A murmur rippled through the gallery. I caught Maria, the single mom who'd reached out to me, clutching her purse, her eyes wide with betrayal. The Hendersons, the retired couple, whispered to each other, their faces pale. Karen's head snapped toward the screen, her lips parting as if she might object, but her attorney put a hand on her arm, silencing her. Sarah continued, her tone unrelenting. The defendants sold 98 homes, profiting over $12 million, while Mr. Caldwell received nothing. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was calculated fraud, and the homeowners of Willow Grove were unwitting pawns in their scheme. The judge turned to the defense. Counselor, your response. The Milwaukee lawyer stood, smoothing his tie. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith based on documentation provided by Crestview Partners. They believed the sale was legitimate. The homeowners, who are the real victims here, have built lives on this land. Mr. Caldwell's demand to evict them is excessive and punitive. Sarah didn't miss a beat. Good faith. Your Honor, the defendant's own emails show they knew the land belonged to my client. They bribed a county official to bypass due diligence. Their good faith is a fiction. The judge's eyes narrowed, and she gestured for Victor to take the stand. He shuffled forward, his expensive suit doing little to hide his unease. Under Sarah's cross-examination, he crumbled faster than I'd expected. Yes, I knew the signature was forged, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Karen said it was foolproof, that Caldwell would never come back. We used Crestview to file the sale, and Hargrove pushed it through. The $50,000 was just to make it look real on paper. The courtroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the air from the room. Karen's face went white, her hands gripping the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her attorney tried to object, but the judge waved him off. Continue, Mr. Lang, she said. Victor's voice grew shakier. Karen handled the HOA, kept the residents in line. We split the profits from the home sales, 60-40, her favor. She said the community would shield us, make it too messy to unravel. Karen shot to her feet. That's a lie, she shouted, her voice cracking. I was protecting the community. Those families trusted me. I didn't know the sale was fake, I trusted Victor and Crestview. The judge banged her gavel. Ms. Whitmore, sit down, or you'll be held in contempt. Karen sank back into her seat, her chest heaving. The gallery buzzed, homeowners turning to each other, their anger shifting from me to the woman who'd rallied them. Maria stood, her voice trembling but clear. You lied to us, Karen. You said Ethan was the enemy, but you stole his land and used us to cover it up. The judge restored order, but the damage was done. Sarah presented more evidence, bank records showing transfers between Karen, Victor, and Crestview Partners, and a deposition from Dennis Hargrove, the county official, who'd agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. He confirmed the bribe and the rushed permits, sealing the case. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Pinnacle Homes is liable for full restitution to Mr. Caldwell for the fraudulent use of his property. The sale agreement is null and void. Ms. Whitmore and Mr. Lang will face criminal charges for forgery and conspiracy, and Mr. Hargrove is under investigation. The county will assist Mr. Caldwell in resolving the status of the 98 homes currently on his land. As the gavel fell, a strange mix of relief and unease settled over me. Karen was escorted out, her head bowed, while Victor followed, muttering to his lawyer. The homeowners lingered, some approaching me with hesitant apologies, others still glaring, unsure where to direct their anger. Sarah clapped a hand on my shoulder. "We won, Ethan. The land's yours, and the real culprits are done." But as we left the courthouse, the late autumn sun casting long shadows across the parking lot, I couldn't shake the weight of what came next. The 98 homes still stood on my land, their occupants now dealing with me directly. Some, like Maria and the Hendersons, wanted to negotiate, to find a way to stay. Others, still loyal to Karen's lies, saw me as the enemy. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind, "This land's yours, Ethan. It's freedom." But freedom, I was learning, came with a cost, one I'd have to navigate carefully if I wanted to reclaim what was mine without losing myself in the process. The dust from the courtroom battle had barely settled when I called a meeting with the Willow Grove homeowners. Karen Whitmore was gone, remanded to custody awaiting her fraud trial, and Victor Lang was singing like a canary to cut a deal. The county had officially restored my title to the 200-acre estate, but the reality on the ground was messier. 98 families still lived on my land, their homes a stubborn reminder of the scam that had upended my life. I wanted to do right by them. Most were innocent victims, just like me, but I wasn't about to let my grandfather's legacy be swallowed by asphalt and bad faith. We gathered in the community center, a squat building at the heart of Willow Grove Estates with beige walls and a faint smell of lemon cleaner. The room was packed, standing room only, with homeowners clutching coffee mugs and folded arms, their faces a mix of hope, skepticism, and lingering resentment. Maria, the single mom who'd reached out early, sat in the front row, her daughter doodling on a notepad. The Hendersons, the retired couple, were nearby, their hands clasped tightly. At the back, a cluster of Karen's diehards whispered among themselves, "There save our homes." Signs now replaced by wary glares. Sarah stood beside me, her presence a quiet anchor as I took the podium. I'd rehearsed this, but my throat still tightened as I faced the crowd. "I know you've been through hell," I started, my voice steady but softer than I'd planned. "You trusted the wrong people, Karen, Pinnacle Homes, the system that let this happen. So did I. But this land is mine, left to me by my grandfather, and I'm not here to destroy your lives. I want to find a way forward." The room was silent, save for a cough in the back. I laid out my offer. I'd sell the land under each home at fair market value, based on an independent appraisal, with payment plans spread over 10 years to ease the burden. No one would be evicted if they worked with me in good faith. "This isn't about profit," I said, meeting Maria's eyes. "It's about making this right for everyone." The response was mixed but promising. Over the next week, 70 families signed on, their relief palpable as we hammered out contracts. Maria was first, tears in her eyes as she shook my hand. "I thought we'd lose everything," she said, her daughter tugging at her sleeve. The Hendersons followed, inviting me to their home for pie and a heartfelt thank you. Others, like a young couple expecting their first child, sent emails expressing gratitude, eager to secure their slice of Willow Creek legally. Each agreement felt like a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my land without tearing lives apart. But not everyone was on board. 28 families, still clinging to Karen's lies or too stubborn to trust me, refused to negotiate. They formed a coalition, pooling money for a lawyer who filed a barrage of lawsuits claiming adverse possession and emotional distress. Sarah dismissed them as legal noise, but they dragged on, clogging the courts and my patience. One man, a burly guy named Tom who'd been at Karen's rallies, cornered me outside the community center. "You think you can just buy us off?" he spat. "This is our home, Caldwell. We're not leaving." I held his gaze, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not your enemy, Tom. Karen and Pinnacle stole from both of us. You can fight me in court, but the law's on my side. Or you can work with me and stay." He stormed off, but I caught a flicker of doubt in his eyes. To honor my grandfather, I kept 100 acres of the estate untouched, a rolling expanse of fields, pines, and the creek where he'd taught me to fish. I had it zoned as a conservation easement, ensuring no developer could ever touch it. The other half, where Willow Grove stood, I legitimized as a community. I formed a new HOA, but this time, I kept a tight grip on its leadership. Appointing Maria as president and setting strict bylaws to prevent another Karen from taking control. The homeowners who'd signed on embraced it, eager for stability and a fresh start. Meanwhile, Karen's world was collapsing. Her lawsuits against me, filed in a desperate bid to save face, were dismissed one by one, the judges citing the overwhelming evidence of her fraud. The homeowners she'd once rallied now turned on her, blaming her for their legal and financial woes. Social media lit up with their fury, X posts with hashtags like #HOAKaren and #WillowGroveScam racked up thousands of likes, sharing screenshots of the damning emails and clips of her courtroom outburst. A local blogger dubbed her HOA Karen, and the nickname stuck, spawning memes and even a viral cartoon of her clutching a megaphone with a crumbling neighborhood behind her. I couldn't help but smirk as I scrolled through the posts, a small satisfaction amid the chaos. By late November, the air in Willow Creek was crisp, the fields gilded with frost. I stood on the untouched half of my land, the creek gurgling nearby, and felt a weight lift. It wasn't perfect, legal battles loomed, and some homeowners would never see me as anything but the enemy, but it felt right. My grandfather's land was mine again, shared now with families who'd earned their place through honesty and compromise. As I walked back to my truck, the sun dipping low, I thought of his words, "This land's yours, Ethan. It's freedom." For the first time in months, I believed I'd honored that. By late autumn, a fragile calm had settled over Willow Creek. The leaves had turned to fiery shades of red and gold, carpeting the untouched half of my 200-acre estate in a way that felt like nature itself was reclaiming what was hers. The families who'd accepted my offer, 70 households now legally tied to their plots, were moving forward, their lives stabilizing as they rebuilt trust in a community no longer under Karen Whitmore's shadow. The new HOA, led by Maria, hummed along smoothly, its meetings focused on practical matters like road maintenance and community gardens rather than propaganda and power plays. For the first time in months, Willow Grove Estates felt like a place where people could live, not just fight. But the 28 holdout families, still clinging to their defiance, were another story. Their lawsuits, built on shaky claims of adverse possession and emotional distress, crumbled one by one in court. Sarah had predicted as much, but watching each case collapse brought a grim satisfaction. I wasn't heartless, I'd given them every chance to negotiate, but their refusal to deal, fueled by Karen's lingering influence, left me no choice. I began the process of reclaiming their lots, serving eviction notices with Sarah's guidance to ensure every step was airtight. It wasn't about money, the legal fees and appraisals were bleeding me dry. It was about principle. This was my land, my grandfather's legacy, and I wasn't going to let a single square foot slip away again. The evictions weren't easy. I drove past Willow Grove one chilly October morning, and a handful of holdouts stood at the entrance, their "Save Our Homes" signs replaced by new ones, "Caldwell's Greed Kills Dreams." Tom, the burly guy who'd confronted me before, was there, his face etched with defeat as he loaded a moving truck. I slowed, tempted to stop and say something, but his glare told me words wouldn't help. Behind him, a woman, his wife, I assumed, wiped her eyes, clutching a box of household goods. Guilt gnawed at me, but I pushed it down. They'd chosen this path, betting on Karen's lies over my offer. Now, the law had spoken. Meanwhile, Karen and Victor Lang's reckoning had come. Their fraud and forgery trial wrapped up in early November, and the courtroom was less crowded this time, no homeowners, just a few reporters and curious locals. Karen, stripped of her polished blazers and sharp smiles, looked diminished in a plain sweater, her hair limp and her eyes hollow. Victor, ever the coward, had taken a plea deal, testifying against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. The evidence, those damning emails, bank records, and Dennis Hargrove's testimony, was overwhelming. The judge sentenced Karen to 7 years for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, with Victor getting 5. As they were led away, Karen's gaze flickered toward me, but there was no defiance left, just resignation. The county, embarrassed by its role, had already fired Hargrove, and a federal investigation into his broader dealings was underway. With the legal battles behind me, I turned to the land itself. The untouched 100 acres, preserved as a conservation easement, were my sanctuary. I'd spent weekends there, clearing a small plot near the creek where my grandfather had taught me to fish. Using savings from my startup, I built a modest cabin, nothing fancy, just a single-story structure with a stone fireplace, a wide porch, and windows that framed the rolling fields. It was my escape from the city's noise, a place to breathe and remember my grandfather's stories. His voice echoed in my mind as I hammered the final nails: land is power, Ethan. Not just money, but roots. Hold it tight. The cabin became my refuge, a place to ground myself after months of chaos. I'd sit on the porch at dusk, a mug of coffee in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The creek murmured nearby, "It's." The cabin became my refuge, a place to ground myself after months of chaos. I'd sit on the porch at dusk, a mug of coffee in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The creek murmured nearby, its rhythm unchanged since my childhood. The developed half of the estate, now a legitimate community, hummed quietly in the distance, its lights twinkling like stars against the darkening fields. The contrast felt right, half wild, half tamed, a balance that honored my grandfather's vision while acknowledging the lives now tied to the land. Social media had quieted, but the #HOA Karen saga still lingered, with occasional posts resurfacing the story of Karen's downfall. A local podcast even did a 3-part series on the Willow Creek scam, painting me as a reluctant hero who'd taken on a corrupt system. I didn't feel like a hero, just a guy who'd fought for what was his. But as I stood on my porch one evening, the air crisp and the stars bright above, a sense of peace settled over me. I'd held the line, reclaimed my family's legacy, and built something new in the process. No one, not Karen, not Pinnacle Homes, not the holdouts or their signs, would ever take this from me again. The land was mine, and so was the freedom it carried. I raised my mug to the horizon, a silent toast to my grandfather, and knew I'd made him proud. Winter draped Willow Creek in a hushed frost, the fields glittering under a pale January sun. My cabin, nestled on the untouched 100 acres of my estate, had become my sanctuary. The wood stove crackled as I pored over maps and plans, sketching a future for the land that balanced my grandfather's vision with the reality of the community now tied to it. The 70 families who'd settled with me were thriving, their homes legally theirs, their lives woven into the fabric of a revitalized Willow Grove Estates. The new HOA, under Maria's steady leadership and my watchful oversight, ran like a well-oiled machine, no trace of Karen Whitmore's manipulative shadow. Monthly meetings focused on practicalities, snow removal schedules, a community garden expansion, even a kids' soccer league. It felt like progress, like the land was healing. But the 28 holdout families remained a thorn in my side. Their lawsuits, though crumbling under the weight of the county's rulings, dragged on, fueled by stubbornness and a lingering loyalty to Karen's lies. Their lawyer, a budget version of the slick Milwaukee attorney who'd abandoned Karen, kept filing motions, each one flimsier than the last. Sarah assured me they were grasping at straws, but their refusal to negotiate gnawed at me. I'd offered them a fair deal, more than fair, given the circumstances, but they'd chosen to fight. Now, their homes stood empty or half-packed, their defiance costing them more than just legal fees. One frigid morning, as I sipped coffee on the cabin's porch, Sarah called, her voice crackling with excitement. "Ethan, one of the holdouts found something on their property, a surveyor's marker from 1972, etched with your grandfather's initials. It's on a plot Pinnacle Homes never disclosed in their records, tucked near the undeveloped hills. It's old, and it suggests there's more to your land's history than we thought." I set the mug down, my pulse quickening. "What kind of marker?" A stone, half buried, with coordinates and your grandfather's initials, J.C. for John Caldwell. The homeowner, Tom, was digging up his backyard, probably looking for leverage in his lawsuit. He's claiming it proves the land's boundaries are disputed, but I think it's something bigger. You need to see it. Curious, I drove to the site that afternoon, my truck crunching over the frosty gravel. The plot was at the edge of Willow Grove, where the manicured lawns gave way to the wild, rolling hills of my conservation easement. Tom stood there, arms crossed, his face a mix of suspicion and desperation. Beside him was the marker, a weathered granite slab, barely a foot tall, etched with J.C. 1972 and a set of coordinates. It was half covered in moss, but the carving was unmistakable. My grandfather's handiwork, deliberate and precise, just like everything he did. This proves the land's not all yours, Tom said, his voice gruff. Maybe Pinnacle had rights to this part. I crouched beside the marker, brushing away the dirt. Pinnacle forged their way onto my land, Tom. This marker's from my grandfather, not them. You're reaching. He scowled but didn't argue. I took photos and sent them to Sarah, who recommended hiring a surveyor to dig into the records. Within days, I had a team combing through county archives and the untouched half of my estate. What they uncovered was a revelation that shifted everything. The marker wasn't just a boundary stone, it was part of a 1972 geological survey my grandfather had commissioned privately. The records, buried in a dusty filing cabinet at the county office, detailed a small but significant deposit of rare earth elements, neodymium and dysprosium, beneath the hills. These minerals, critical for tech like batteries and wind turbines, were worth millions, potentially tens of millions, in today's market. My grandfather had known but kept its secret, wary of developers and mining companies that would strip the land bare. He'd marked the site himself, a quiet act of stewardship, ensuring the secret stayed safe until the right hands claimed it. The discovery hit like a thunderbolt. Word spread fast, and the holdouts, sensing a windfall, changed their tune overnight. Tom's lawyer called, his tone suddenly conciliatory. My clients are willing to negotiate, Mr. Caldwell. They're ready to discuss purchasing their lots at your terms. Others followed, flooding my inbox with emails begging for meetings. I pictured their faces, once defiant, now desperate, and felt a cold satisfaction. You had your chance, I told their lawyer over the phone, my voice firm. I offered fair deals months ago. They chose lawsuits. I'm done negotiating with them. Sarah backed me up, her legal advice as sharp as ever. You don't owe them anything, Ethan. The law's clear, and the mineral rights are yours, tied to the deed. Let them stew. Instead of selling to the holdouts, I turned my focus to the future. I partnered with a sustainable mining company, one with a track record of low-impact extraction and environmental restoration. We drafted a contract ensuring the hill's beauty would be preserved, no open-pit scars or clear-cut forests. The revenue would fund a trust, named the John Caldwell Legacy Trust, to support the Willow Grove community and beyond. I envisioned schools with new science labs, a park where kids could play by the creek, and scholarships for local students, especially those from families like Maria's. The trust would embody my grandfather's belief, land is power, but it's only as good as the people it serves. The holdouts' lawsuits collapsed as their leverage vanished. Some moved out quietly, their homes repossessed and listed for sale to new buyers who'd respect the land's terms. Others lingered, but their fight was over. By spring, the estate was fully mine again, its boundaries clear, its value unlocked. The hills bloomed green, wildflowers dotting the slopes where the mineral deposit lay hidden. I stood by the surveyor's marker one morning, the air warm and sweet with the scent of new growth. Karen's scam, meant to rob me, had backfired spectacularly, exposing her greed and revealing the land's true worth. As I walked back to the cabin, the creek gurgling in the distance, I felt my grandfather's presence stronger than ever. The estate wasn't just power, it was a legacy, one I'd protect for generations to come. I'd fought for it, held the line, and built something lasting. No scam, no lawsuit, no shadow of Karen Whitmore could take that away. The land was mine, and so was its future.